Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, Geoff Mosher is here on a Mosher Monday. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. Bet Bet365. We're live at the Gallery inside Ocean Casino, the Gallery Bar, Book, and Games. And don't forget this hour of the show, we want to thank our friends over at Taco Cat. Got a craving for tacos? Then check out Taco Cat, located at 8 South Essex Avenue in Margate. Visit them at TacoCatSouthJersey.com for more info. Give them a follow on Instagram at Taco Cat Margate. All right, Eagles football at 4. Mosher is on the way here in just a couple of moments. We'll get him and his thoughts on what happened in the game yesterday. But I have a couple more. You know, we just did who gets the credit. I gave it to Jake Elliott because he went 4 for 4 and had a big day. But I think you can make an argument, and, you know, everybody has their own thoughts on who gets the credit in the game. I think one thing that gets overlooked in the game on how they won is Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say he doesn't get credit for the win. I think we just so much expect stuff from Jalen Hurts that we're almost discrediting him for the game he had yesterday because we expect something different. So let's start there with Geoff Mosher. Jeff, you know, you look at Hurts yesterday, the numbers, great game. I thought he made a couple weird decisions. I mean, the one, he throws the ball down the field to A.J. Brown and double covered. He made a couple throws like that. But big picture, I thought Hurts played a pretty good game and made some really good throws. It's just almost he's now a victim of the success he had last year, that where you look at that game yesterday, I think a lot of people say, well, where's the guy we had before? He played a pretty good game yesterday, and I don't know that he's getting the credit for it.
Yeah, I think it was his best game, Mike, so far of the year. I think he and the entire team is a victim of last year's success. I think, you know, people want style points. They're worried about certain things that don't look like last year. And, you know, I know that on the podcast, Adam and I talked on Inside the Birds, you know, all summer long about remade middle of the defense and teams having a whole year to really, especially your division opponents, right, to prepare for what you do best, and, you know, how hard it is to repeat your success year after year, especially for those teams that lose the Super Bowl. I mentioned the Bengals last year. You know, they got off to a really tough start before kind of finding their way toward the end of the year, and they were back in it at the end of the year, as you would, you know, at least in the playoffs, as you would think. I would encourage people to, if they haven't seen it yet, to watch the Tom Brady. I didn't love it, but there was a good part of it. The Man in the Arena from a couple of years ago, because he goes through, right, each Super Bowl season or most of the seasons of his life. And you can, if you go through that or listen to him go through it, you'll see after every time they won the Super Bowl, the next year presented a whole new set of challenges that they had to overcome. And sometimes they could, sometimes they couldn't. A lot of times, though, they started off a little bit slower than they expected. And you know, if you're looking for a Rembrandt here every game, you're just not going to get that. It's a different team. But I did think that their pass offense had improved greatly yesterday since the first game of the season. And are there things that they still need to get cleaned up? Sure. And I'm sure we'll be saying that, you know, in November, right? Every team has that. They're 4-0, though. There's only 2 4-0 teams, and they're one of them.
Yeah, A.J. Brown said it yesterday. You don't want to be playing your best football now, and the Eagles clearly are not, but they're still winning these games. So let's break down why they're able to win when they're not playing their best. They're obviously very talented, but we just said Hurts, I thought, played his best game. But do you look at the game yesterday, and is it on par to the really good games he played? I feel like every week we'd come in last year, Mosh, and say, man, Hurts was awesome. He was the reason why they won. And I don't know if, like, you know, we just said who gets credit for the game. Everyone's saying Jake Elliott, Reed Blankenship's arm. you got a variety of answers. Nobody wants to say, well, Hurts is the reason. Where last year it felt like, well, Hurts is why you won all these games. So did he play a game yesterday that was on par with some of the great performances he had last year?
Well, some of the great ones, like you think of the Steelers game, the Titans game, the Super Bowl, outside of the fumble. No, I mean, that game wasn't on par, but I mean, you know, not every game's going to be that way. I think he played a really good game outside of, as you mentioned, a few decisions. And there were a couple of times, and he's been doing this more this year than last year. I will agree with the critics who I've noted, because we've seen it on tape as well, that he is leaving the pocket at perceived pressure as opposed to real pressure. There are times where he's getting out of dodge when, the bullets really aren't flying. But that's something that he's worked on in the past and gotten a lot better at, and he still doesn't do it nearly as much as he did 2 years ago when he was a full-year starter. It's just something that I've noticed, and I thought his accuracy was pretty good yesterday. Look, the 3rd and 8th throw to Olamide Zaccheaus, was it? For 11 yards.
No, the Zaccheaus throw, he ripped it.
Yeah, I mean, that's about as good as a throw you're going to see in the NFL. It really was. And that's a vintage Jalen Hurts decision, read, and throw right there, and that was really nice to see. I think he made plenty of good plays.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. I think he made, but they just made some curious decisions as well. I mean, the one he's kind of telling A.J. Brown, keep going, it was like a schoolyard play, and he throws it up, and when the ball came down, it's A.J. Brown surrounded by 2 guys, and you're like, what were you looking at there? He had a couple of decisions like that. The throw he made, look, Smith, man, all year long, this Swift and Smith are driving me nuts here. Smith went up and made a great catch, but I thought that was a great throw for him to get it up there in a spot. So, he's making some throws. But to me, there's some curious decisions, but I think the biggest one, and I want to pick your brain on this, Jeff. I mean, they ran it once yesterday. It was a 3rd down. He tucked the ball under his arm and power off the left side, and he gets 12 yards for a 1st down. That play is essentially ripped out of the playbook. And any other time he elects to move or run, he's going down like a ton of bricks as fast as he can. And I'm wondering, is it just hammered in his head? You cannot take hits. You can't take hits. And are they telling Brian Johnson, you can't run that play more than once or twice here and there?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a good observation. I think we've noticed that as well, that he does slide early, which, by the way, I don't have a problem with. And there's a lack of dynamicism, is that sort of a lack of dynamic running to when he does run. Even when he doesn't slide, I feel like he doesn't have that stutter step this time. That I remember 2 years ago against New Orleans when he kind of climbed up the middle there, did a stutter step on a linebacker and scored a touchdown. And it was like, whoa, that looked like Barry Sanders, And the thing about Jalen Hurts is that he was always quicker and more dynamic than he actually was fast, because it's not like he ran a 4.4 or 5.5. He's not Anthony Richardson. He's not even Josh Allen when it comes to timed run speed, but he always had a dynamic element to the way he ran. He obviously has big, strong legs and the clean spotting, 650 and all. So I don't know if now, because he's clearly getting down and sliding sooner, if that has made him a little bit more of a reluctant runner when he does run, and you don't see that dynamic ability as much. But how many times do we say, at some point you can't be running all over the field all year long, all game long. Last year it was the shoulder injury. The year before it was the ankle injury. And granted, I'm not saying these all came when he was running, but he's just trying to, in general, keep the hit toll off of him. And the more that he slides and the more that he stays in the pocket and delivers, the more he's going to keep that hit toll off him and try to stay healthy. So I don't know, because none of the coaches have said it and he hasn't said it, but there absolutely looks like a clear and intent decision-making process here of him not trying to extend runs.
Totally agree. And to me, that is the one definitive change or difference or something that looks different about this offense, is that when they had, to me, I remember I was on radio shows all across the country last year and would always get asked, and I said, guys, this guy is making the right decision on 95% of passes and runs. He hands the ball to Sanders. He gives it to him when he's supposed to. He pulls it and keeps it when he's supposed to. And I feel that he's not making – his decision-making is not the same, and I wonder if it's, I can't take the hit, I got to get rid of the ball. Or I can't take a hit, so I'm going to hand it off. Or I can't take a hit, so I'm just sliding here instead of trying to spin and stutter step and do whatever I have to do to get an extra half a yard. And that's not happening.
I will take a look when the All-22 comes out. The one thing I'll say is I don't think he's handing it off when he should be running, because that decision is usually dictated by math and who's in the box and where your numbers are. And if you're seeing a light or let's say a heavy box, right? And it makes more sense. You know that edge defender is going to crash down, and they're defending the run, and you're running it anyway. You're hurting your team. So I don't think Jalen Hurts is out there trying to purposely hand the ball off into numerical disadvantages. I can't imagine that that's the case. I didn't notice that in any of the first few games. In fact, they've seen a lot of light box, weirdly, in the first 2 or 3 games. What the Vikings were doing was sort of baffling, which is why the Eagles had such a huge running game. But I have noticed that even when he just runs and slides, right, the defenses are still accounting for him at times. I was really studying the Vikings tape from 2 games ago now, when they were playing some really interesting boxes, right, and light, and trying to use their linebackers as defensive linemen to stop the run. And the one thing I noticed was Jordan Hicks, on those inside zone runs that the Eagles were doing, he was still sort of like flat-footed, patrolling the outside area as a linebacker and not getting a full step toward the inside to get DeAndre Swift, because he had to respect the fact that Jalen Hurts could run. So it still helps. It's still working. The defenders are still aware that at any time he can tuck and run. And again, he doesn't have to rip off a 50-yard run or fake 3 people out. All he has got to do is keep it slide like he's been doing occasionally and move the chains for that to be impactful.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, looking back, football at 4, and the Eagles win yesterday. And then how many times in that game, I don't know about you, I'm watching, 8 minutes left, Eagles have the lead. Man, they can run this game out. The run game never really got going yesterday. Did they not commit to it? Were they not having success? Why do you feel that the run game was not the same factor it was in? Now, I get it. Washington's front is pretty good, but we heard that about Tampa's front, right? I mean, so why were they unable to really dominate up front and run the ball the way they like to?
Yeah, good question. Obviously the All-22 is going to have some answers on that. I thought Mailata at times struggled. I'll have to go check and see. But clearly, Mike, the intent of the Eagles was different maybe than the intent of the 60,000 people or so at the lake. The Eagles came out and said, you know what? This secondary, Emmanuel Forbes is a rookie. They've got guys moving around. Like, we can take advantage of this secondary. They have all their money and all their high draft picks invested in that front 4, front 6, whatever you want to call it, with the 4 first-round picks on the D-line, the first-round pick, Jamin Davis at linebacker. Let's throw on the secondary. Let's take advantage of the fact that Emmanuel Forbes is 166 pounds and is going to match up against A.J. Brown, who's just a bully, right? Let's give the ball to Devontae Smith. And they came out passing a whole lot more. And, again, the passing game looked pretty good. Now, the areas that didn't look good was third down. The Eagles were not a good third down team, and I'm sure that that's going to be something that they look at the tape to see where it went wrong and why it went wrong, and try to work on correcting that. But in general, they always like to go and come out of a game with more X plays than given up, and they had a lot of X plays in the passing game between A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
All right, Jeff, let me go to the defensive side of the ball, which I guess an uneven game. I mean, it's weird. Like, I looked at this game and said the Eagles' interior defensive line should dominate the Washington interior defensive line, get Hal off his spot, cause him to rush things, make some mistakes. That didn't happen, but yet they got 5 sacks. 3 of them came from Nick Morrow. I think the Eagles' defensive line still had an impact, even though it wasn't the impact that they normally have. It allowed other people to have an impact. So let's start with the up-front portion of that matchup yesterday, which I thought would be a big check mark towards Philly, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know how you read that.
Well, the stats show that once again, just like last year, Washington was able to run the ball somewhat efficiently on the Eagles. They ran for over 100 yards. They had over 25 carries. They were going to stick to the run. They knew they had to shorten the game in a sense, or at least try to move the chains the best they could. Robinson's a good running back. Offensive line, not very good, but they did what they had to do to get him sprung a little bit with extra tight ends and things of that nature. But honestly, if you take Sam Howell's runs, which were not designed runs, they were scrambles, out of it, it becomes, I think he had 40 rushing yards, right? So it's well under 100 yards. And the average per carry is well under 3, I think, or 3.5, which is not good by NFL standards if you take the Sam Howell scramble out. So where the rate breakdowns, I think, occurred mostly was third down, where Washington was something like 47%. And again, I know people don't like to do this, but I'm going to do it. I tip my cap to Howell. I thought he got out of a lot of pressure. He scrambled. He made second reaction plays. And the one thing we know about the Eagles is if the front four can't get to you, the quarterback can get to the back end. You saw Kirk Cousins do that. He would get mobbed. But on the 2 or 3 plays where they figured out how to block it up, he would get Addison. He would get Justin Jefferson, right? Because the Eagles' back end is where all the injuries are. It's where all the moving parts are right now. And Howell was able to – he made some pretty good on the run. I think sometimes you just have to say, that guy did a good job. And it's not to say the Eagles can't get better or correct things, but you also have to have realistic expectations. You have James Bradbury playing the slot for the first time in his life. You have Josh Jobe playing outside corner for the first time in his life. He had 2 healthy safeties, one of them being Terrell Edmonds, who's never been a really good coverage guy. You had some penalties by Edmonds and by Zach Cunningham. That's the type of stuff you look at and you say, all right, that you got to clean up, because those direct to first down points for Washington. In fact, if you take the Zach Cunningham holding away, the James Bradbury holding away, and the Terrell Edmonds penalties away, if those don't happen, if the Eagles are more disciplined, I don't think Washington's in that game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. There was some ticky-tack stuff. I thought the A.J. Brown one was embarrassingly bad. I mean, that's real bad. The one on Bradbury I thought was ticky-tack, and they said it during the broadcast. I mean, they're bad, but that happens every week. You got to account for. Also, I guess Nick Morrow with the 3 sacks. Why? Why did Sean Desai? Is he using his linebacker differently? It looked like delayed blitzes, too. It looked like there was kind of a delay, disguising a little bit. And I guess moving forward, Nick Morrow is making you wonder what happens to Nakobe Dean when he's ready to play.
Nick Morrow is playing well. Certainly benefiting from how well the front line is playing. Sean Desai did call – either Sean Desai called more blitzes or, to your point, there are certain times where a linebacker, it's called green dogs, right, where you're in charge of the running back in man coverage. But if the running back stays in the pass protect and you have nobody to cover, and so one of those two was happening. Either those were called blitzes, green dogs, but either way, Nick Morrow was able. He's pounds, looks like a kid. If you give him a little bit of open channel on the way to the ball carrier, or the quarterback, then he's going to get there, and he did a good job with that. But I don't think that Nakobe Dean's losing his job to Nick Morrow because of this.
We lost you, Mos. We're losing you there. It looked like, and you just said something a little spicy, that he doesn't think that Nakobe Dean is losing his job to Nick Morrow. But if Morrow is being used this way, can they use Dean this way? And I said before the season started with Nakobe Dean, I thought he would be an impactful player, meaning a playmaking linebacker, a guy who did what Nick Morrow did yesterday. 3 sacks, breaking up passes, interceptions, that kind of stuff. Morrow has far exceeded expectations. For those of you who are like watching this game, 41 was all over the place yesterday. I mean, every time you looked around, you saw number 41, and you probably were thinking, who the hell's number 41? It's Nick Morrow. That's who it is, Nick Morrow. And, Zach Cunningham, he's just steady Eddie. He's just kind of going sideline to sideline. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see with what they do in that spot moving forward here. The last thing, if you're just tuning in, by the way, Football at 4 brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Cam Jurgens is going to miss some time. He's got a sprained foot, and he could be week to week. We'll see. Sua Opeta is going to play that spot. Yeah, all right, Jeff, real quick, because we got to get out of here, but I want to just – you were mentioning something about Morrow and Dean and what that might look like moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think, like you heard me correctly. I don't think that Nick Morrow is stealing the job. I don't think he's Wally Pipping, or what is it? Is that the term, Wally Pipping?
Yeah, Wally Pipp.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be. If anything, maybe you start to see a 2 linebacker nickel package instead of a 350 big nickel that they've been trying to play, but they're hurt with safety there. You might see Morrow get in there with Nakobe Dean in nickel and have Zach Cunningham come off the field because Morrow is a better cover linebacker than Zach Cunningham.
Okay, Juergens, the impact of that injury.
Yeah, it's huge. It's twofold. You need a right guard. And look, Sua Opeta played well. And I think I was on with you at the end of the summer. I know we reported on Inside the Birds that Sua Opeta was one of the most improved players in camp all around. Not just improved linemen, but all around. Definitely won his spot on the team. He's much more versatile now. He can play right guard and left guard. When he first got to the team, he really could only play left. He wasn't very good in pass pro. He was more of a run-blocking lineman who could only play one side. So, you heard Nick Sirianni say he played really well. It looked to me like they didn't really miss a beat, so he'll be the guy in for now. We'll see what he's like as a starter. But honestly, the issue is what happens if Jason Kelce limps off the field? Because Cam Juergens is the backup center, and he would have slid over to center if Kelce were to be hurt. So now they don't even have any other person with snapping experience. They'll have to, probably activate or elevate Julian Good-Jones from the practice squad to take up an elevation because he is a center by trade. But I'm not sure you want to be in a battle with anybody, especially as we get later on here in the schedule with Julian Good-Jones as your center.
Yeah, you're right. People forget about that basically Juergens is also the backup center. So Sua Opeta, a undrafted player who's been around since 2019, he will now be the right guard over Tyler Steen, which I guess isn't good news there either, that Steen isn't even your backup there. This was a third-round pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't interpret it that way. I know people will, but, remember this time last year, Cam Juergens did not win the right guard spot. Obviously, they had Isaac Seumalo and Jason Kelce came back, but I think there were a couple of times Seumalo had to come off the field, and Juergens was not the first person in. It was either Jack Driscoll or Sua Opeta, if I'm not mistaken, because, that was a rookie year for Cam Juergens, and they just felt like he needed to get bigger, stronger, more ready. And I think Tyler Steen, you can just put him in the same boat there. He's learning. He did not play guard in college. He's learning positions. So Jack Driscoll has played it before. Sua Opeta has played it before. I just think that there's a pecking order here, and it's way too early to start saying, oh, man, what about Tyler Steen, just because he's not, next man up.
All right, Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast. Those guys go a lot more in detail on some of these topics and more. Jeff's back on Wednesday. And, of course, tomorrow Adam Kaplan is here to give us his thoughts on this game. And now you got to get ready with no Juergens for Aaron Donald and the Rams. And, of course, we'll talk more about that later on this week here on Football at 4. Geoff Mosher, thanks, buddy.
You got it, Mike. Take care.